Good day. I'm David Smith. Look around. There are about 60 people within this courtroom. If you are an Armenian in the Ottoman Empire at the dawn of World War I, roughly 48 out of the 60 of you would be dead right now. During the Armenian Genocide of 1915, up to 1.2 of 1.5 million Armenians living in the Ottoman Empire died. Now, who would be to blame for such an atrocity? Who is truly responsible for genocide? Can we pinpoint a culprit for this genocide? Today, we intend on proving that Mustafa Kemal Ataturk is guilty of the genocide committed against the Armenian minority due to his role in the Turkish national movement. Ataturk's portrayal of the Armenians as barbaric and violent fueled the flames of their discrimination. First, we will talk with Karnik Panay, a survivor of the genocide. Make no mistake, this horrific obscenity did in fact take place, and Mr. Panay is living proof of it. He will explain the way he was treated by the Turkish government. Then we will hear from historian Aysel Morin, who will tell us about the rhetoric used in Kemal's 6-day speech that greatly energized Turkish nationalism, leading to anti-Armenian dialogue and Armenian genocide denial. At the heart of the Turkish government stood Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, a demagogue who rose to power through his expert utilization of fear and manipulation. Today, we will prove that this man, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, was responsible and guilty of the genocide against Armenians in the 20th century.
To all persons of the court, we welcome you here today to provide every one of you with all the possible information and substantial evidence in order to prove the innocence of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. It is through this evidence that we will let you see, as we do, that Ataturk was not at fault for the accused crimes. In tandem with our presentation of this evidence, we will have as a witness Sahil Bazak, who as Kemal's confidential assistant will tell his firsthand account of the character and his actions. A man of honor and high morals, not of violence and menace. You will also hear from Talat Pasha. Let us start from the beginning. With the fall of the Ottoman Empire, Turkish nationalism was inevitable, and the desire to be self-governed was a right in the new modern era, given to them by the Europeans with their definition of nation-states. This self-determination arose predominantly in the minds of devout civil servants, such as our defendant himself. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk encouraged the development of the state of Turkey by promoting his Kemalist policies for cultural homogeny, asking simply for Armenian deportation, not their liquidation. This was the best way to peacefully acquire a new fully Turkish state. With the conversion of the Ottoman Empire into a nation-state with clearly defined borders, Armenians present in the enclaves within this proposed state of Turkey would have led to dire centrifugal forces that would push the state apart. There were no enforced regional boundaries in the Ottoman Empire. It was not a colossal responsibility to ask for the Armenians to set up shop somewhere else, outside of the rule of the Turkish Ottomans. Now let me ask you, is it fair to put all the blame of a few rogue nationalists on the accused, who only fought for Turkish stability and the betterment of the Ottoman Empire?
I would like to call on Aysel Morin, who will be speaking with us through video call. Miss Morin, please tell us about yourself.
Good morning, my name is Aysel Morin, and I'm an associate professor at Eastern Carolina University. I earned my PhD in rhetoric and culture at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and for most of my career I spent it researching and studying nationalism, specifically Turkish nationalism and Kemalist discussion.
Thank you. Now, can you tell us about the time period in which the Armenian genocide took place?
The Armenian genocide took place in a period when the Ottoman Empire was rapidly declining and had noticeably been for the past few decades, as they began losing territories in both the Balkans and in North Africa. Adding on top of that, World War I was on the horizon, and this all just leads to weaker government and therefore general unrest within the people. And when there's unrest within the people, nationalists can come to power. For the Ottoman Empire, Turkish nationalists did, and when they eventually and inevitably became tired and unsatisfied by the Ottoman government and Ottoman rule, they took reform movements into their own hands, creating the Young Turk movement of 1908, who later on are the perpetrators of the Armenian Genocide.
Can you confirm that the defendant was a member of the Young Turks? And please speak about the purpose of the defendant's 6-day speech.
Mustafa Kemal Ataturk was indeed a member of the Young Turks in 1908. As for the speech in 1927, Ataturk's Nutuk, which is the modern Turkish name for the 6-day speech, was a way to really unite the Turks and establish a clear and cohesive national identity. In the speech, he, in a way, describes himself in two halves. The first half being the mortal flesh and blood, while the other half is the savior, a human representation of the nation's dream. And he also described himself as the leader of a leaderless nation. In the speech, he also creates a form of otherness by saying there are only two sides of the nation's dream. Us, the Turks, and then the others. That would be any other nation, and therefore the enemy.
Having said that, do you think that it's plausible Ataturk's influence on the Turkish nation had drastic effects on the Turkish perception of the Armenian genocide?
I would argue that yes, Ataturk's actions certainly could have fueled or energized Turkish nationalists to the point of genocide, as well as the later denial of the Armenian genocide in the aftermath. Ostensibly, Ataturk was just the hero of Gallipoli or the father of Turkey, when in reality such one-sided narratives are dangerous because there are so many more complexities regarding both his character and his motivations.
As you can see, the rhetoric used by Ataturk in respect to the Armenian population was the direct cause for their genocide. He is by no means an innocent man, as the defense is trying to paint him. As a member of the Young Turks, Ataturk was the leader of this movement that ended in disaster for the Armenians.
As a professor, learning only through sources and the historical text provided for you, what credibility do you have in connection to the genocide itself if your only knowledge is from oral and written sources passed down over time in written communication?
I, as a historian, take pride in my studies. So, my research is not just predicated on secondary sources or a he said, she said basis. My knowledge of the subjects and my conclusions also come from analyzing primary source documents like Kemal's 6-day speech, or learning from survivors' experiences and collaborating with other academics and experts in the field.
Thank you for your time, Ms. Morin.
I would like to call Carnegie Pinion to the stand. So, Mr. Pinion, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Carnegie Pinion, and I'm a survivor of the Armenian Genocide. I wrote a memoir called Goodbye Antora about it.
So, could you please elaborate more on your time living through the genocide?
I was left in the Antora orphanage with about 1,000 Armenian children and 400 Kurdish children as we were left by Turkish administrators. Before I was brought to the orphanage, I was deported from my hometown by Turkish soldiers. I was deported and my whole community walked to Syria, where eventually my family passed. I was left alone to survive. I was just a child during the genocide, but the things I saw and the people I witnessed being killed is something I will never forget to this day.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Mr. Pinion. What would you like to say to those in denial about the genocide?
For those who don't believe that this genocide occurred, I ask for you to listen to my story and my experience.
As you can see, Mr. Pinion is living evidence of the Armenian genocide. His story and experience provides a first-hand account for you all. It is undeniable that this genocide occurred, and I would like to make it known that Mr. Pinion is a survivor. His trauma and experience can and will never be erased.
Seeing how you were only a child at the beginning of this event's occurrence through the end, how could you have had the mental capacity to comprehend the ideals and policies of our accused? And furthermore, to stand in this courtroom and draw a correlation between our defendant and the mass murder of Armenian civilians.
Although I was only a young child during the genocide, I witnessed deaths and saw how the Turkish leaders took over and killed thousands of my Armenian people. That trauma has stuck with me forever, and I will never forget all of the blood and killings I saw. I wrote a memoir detailing about the genocide and specific things I saw happening. This correlates with Mustafa Ataturk because he was the founder of modern Turkey and then conductor of the genocide. I was a witness of his involvement of the genocide.
Thank you for your time.
Defense will now call their first witness.
Salih Bazak, you may come to the stand. Mr. Bazak, would you explain who you are and your connections to Mustafa Kemal Ataturk?
My name is Salih Bazok, and I worked under the accused as his confidential assistant. Kemal acted as my senior officer for several years in our objective to unify the people of the Ottoman Empire under one state.
What did you observe about the actions of and manner of Kemal through your work?
Well, I worked under Kemal for several years, as I said, and I can attest to the fact that he is truly a kind soul who cared immensely for his nation and publicly was heavily against the liquidation of the Armenians. Not only did he have compassion for his subordinates, but he always put others before himself. I wholeheartedly believe that Kemal was simply acting in his people's best interest.
What was your objective in respect to the Armenian genocide in question?
Well, our objective was simple: to create a form of cohesion among the Turkish population of the Ottoman Empire in the hopes of creating one sovereign and homogeneous Turkish nation. In order for this to happen, the Armenian minority would, of course, have to move to the outskirts of these proposed borders, for their own betterment, of course. We never intended for the liquidation of this population, and I agree with Kemal's statement that the killings were an atrocity and cause for deep shame on the Ottoman Empire's behalf. However, one man cannot be held responsible for the actions of his followers.
Thank you.
Are you able to claim that you were present for all actions and orders acted out by Kemal?
Well, no. As his secretary, I did not have access to all of the information that higher-ranking officials were privy to. For my public interactions with Kemal, I can claim that he only ever condemned actions of violence, on both sides, of course. However, I cannot speak to any private conversations he may have had in regards to the Armenians.
Thank you for your time.
We now call Talat Pasha to the stand to testify in defense of the accused. Mr. Pasha, as an ambassador, what coordination did you have with our defendant, Kemal?
As an ambassador, I worked in relation with Kemal in cleansing Anatolia and defending our people from the Armenians' nature.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Talat Pasha.
What would have happened had you not cleansed your empire from the Armenians?
Had we not cleansed the Ottoman Empire, the Armenians would have torn the state apart. We tried very hard to coexist with them. However, their violent nature and atrocities committed against the Turkish Empire, the Turkish people, were unforgivable. It was essential to create separate states for both.
Why didn't you distinguish between the guilty and the innocent?
To make this distinction was impossible, simply because someone who may have been seen as innocent today could be seen as guilty tomorrow or a week from now. Out of concern for Turkey's safety, we had to silence all other concerns. It was a necessity to exterminate them all, to eliminate the threat of revenge.
No further questions, Your Honor.
And now I call the defendant to the stand. Mr. Kemal Ataturk, what is your response to the weight of being put at blame for a genocide against an entire ethnic group of people of the Ottoman Empire of Turkey?
I think that the accusations being brought against me are disgusting and vile. I would never endorse the liquidation of any cultural people. I simply fought for the state of Turkey and to give my nation a home. Is that so wrong?
Were you directly and fully responsible for the mass murders of a people?
I never personally held a gun in my hand and shot any single Armenian in the face. To me, it is inconceivable for me to have watched somebody die in my own hand. I would not have allowed it. So no, I was not directly nor fully responsible for the killings of the Armenian people.
Would you say that war as a construct is the ultimate display of character in human beings?
I will do anything for my people, and securing a homeland was a top priority. I wanted our voices to be heard, and I took a leadership position on behalf of my nation. Not many other people would have done what I did, yet I'm still being blamed for taking action.
Thank you for your time. Those are all the questions we have on the defense.
I'd like to play for the court an audio recording from Mr. Kamal's time in the Battle of Gallipoli.
I don't order you to fight. I order you to die.
This is a direct quote from you, Mr. Kamal, to your troops courageously fighting on your behalf. I ask you, does this sound like someone who cares so heavily for his people? Does this sound like compassion and kindness to you? What was your reasoning for asking these troops to lay down their lives?
Their deaths would buy us time for reinforcements to come. At the time, I was thinking as an army official, and as an army official only. My duty at the moment was to ensure the success of the battle, and for that, I am sorry to say I was forced to sacrifice these outrageous troops.
So, can you confirm that you ordered your soldiers to die simply to buy time?
Yes, that is correct.
Then maybe it isn't so inconceivable for you to watch someone die on your own orders. That is all, thank you. Mr. Kamal may not have physically held a gun to anyone's head, but he most certainly had the motivation and capability to logistically carry out heinous acts of violence, especially against the Armenians. The people of the Ottoman Empire looked to the defendant for direction and stability. His answer for them was violence. Violence against an innocent population who he had painted as evil and barbaric, the enemies of a Turkish state. Mr. Panin's first-hand account of the atrocities carried out by the Turkish government undoubtedly show Mr. Kamal's unjustified and vile abuse of power. Mr. Morin's analysis of Mr. Kamal's actions show how he exacerbated the Young Turks' mindset against the Armenians to such an extent that the idea of genocide became a necessity. How can the defense paint the defendant as an innocent and peace-loving man when he himself said that he would win by whatever means necessary, even going as far to ordering his troops to die? It is unfair to the victims of this genocide to let this man tell tall tales about his kindness and compassion if he is in no way, shape, or form anything of the sort. Mr. Kamal is the epitome of evil, and I plead to the jury to grant the Armenian minority their justice. Don't let the lives that were lost have been lost in vain.
Mustafa Kemal Ataturk is simply a revolutionary. He united his Turkish Ottomans with his Kemalist policies and led them to greatness. The speech the prosecution are trying to attempt to slander was Kemal's way of connecting with the people of the Ottoman Empire. From the views of people that he worked closely, you can see that his personality was not what the prosecution makes him out to be. He was not a monster, that he is only guilty of exemplary leadership and the unification of his Turkish people. He personally does not have the blood of any Armenian man, woman, or child on his hands. And I hope that with all the evidence presented today, that the jury's eyes will have opened to the reality that Mustafa Ataturk Kemal was not at fault for the incidents of 1915.